The gate swung open before Gaba could stop it. He had been the gatekeeper of the Adeleke compound for 22 years. He had seen plenty. Quarrels at midnight, strangers with bad news. Once, a goat that somehow wandered 3 streets and sat directly in front of the entrance like it owned the place. But nothing had prepared him for the woman standing in the rain at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, soaked to her collar, carrying nothing but a small envelope and a look in her eyes that made his chest feel hollow. "Madam," he said carefully, the way a man speaks when he is not sure if what he is seeing is real. "Madam, who are you looking for?" She looked past him at the house. The lights were on upstairs. A television flickered behind the curtain. "Tell Rafiu," she said quietly, "that his wife has come home." Gaba's lantern slipped from his hand. Now, before we go any further, if you are the type of person who finishes a story like this and says nothing, today is the day you break that habit. Hit that subscribe button right now, drop a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from, and like this video so more people find this story. Because what you are about to hear, 15 years of silence, one betrayal that changed everything, and a woman who came back from the dead with receipts, you will not want to watch alone. Now, let us go back. 15 years back to where it all began. Somtochukwu Adeleke, Somo to everyone who loved her, was not the kind of woman who walked into a room. She arrived, not loudly, not with performance, but the way sunlight arrives through a window you forgot was there. People turned, people smiled without knowing why. She had that quality, warmth that cost her nothing and gave others everything. She had grown up in a small compound in Ibadan, the daughter of a retired school teacher and a woman who sold the best fried fish in the neighborhood. She was not rich. She had no connections, no powerful uncle, no land in her name. What she had was a sharp mind, a soft laugh, and the kind of face that held no malice whatsoever. Her sister Ngozi had the same parents and a completely different spirit. Ngozi watched people. She catalogued what they had that she didn't. She kept scores that no one else knew were being kept. Someone never noticed. She loved her sister the way you love someone you grew up beside, completely and without conditions. That was her one blind spot, the one that would almost kill her. Rafiu Adeleke saw Somo for the first time at Tejuosho Market on a Thursday afternoon. He was there buying fabric for his mother. She was there arguing passionately with a market woman about the price of tomatoes, and she was losing, but she was not backing down, and something about that made him laugh before he even knew he was laughing. He found a reason to walk past her store 3 more times before he walked up the courage to speak. "You know she's not going to reduce that price," he said. Somo turned and looked at him. "I know," she said, "but she needs to know I know the real price. It's the principle." He laughed again. She smiled. That was it. That was the whole beginning. He came to her father's house 5 times before the old man agreed to talk seriously. He brought palm wine twice, kola nut once, and on the 4th visit, he brought Somo's favorite chin-chin from a shop he had asked around 3 different people to locate because she had mentioned it once in passing and he had stored it like it was important information. It was. Her father watched all of this and nodded slowly. Their wedding was a small thing by Lagos standards, but rich in the ways that matter. The compound was full, the food was full, the music did not stop until 2 in the morning. Somo danced until her shoes gave up on her, and Rafiu held her in the middle of the compound under the string lights and kissed her the way a man kisses someone who he has been waiting for his whole life. Slow, intentional, like he was trying to memorize it. She pulled back and looked at him, her hands on his face, and said, "If you ever make me cry, Rafiu Adeleke, I will find you." He laughed and kissed her again, longer this time, and the crowd around them erupted. Ngozi sat at the table nearest the gate and watched. She smiled when people looked at her. She clapped when everyone clapped, but her eyes, when they settled on Somo laughing in Rafiu's arms, held something that had no name in polite company. By the second year of the marriage, Somo was pregnant with their first child, and Rafiu had expanded his logistics company to 2 more states. Life was full and warm and moving in the right direction. They had bought a proper house. They had a housekeeper. They had plans. Ngozi moved in with them because her rent had expired and she had nowhere else to go. Somo welcomed her without hesitation. "She's my sister," she told Rafiu when he said nothing but looked at her with careful eyes. Where else would she go? He did not argue. He trusted Somo's heart more than his own instincts. That was his one blind spot. Dike, Rafiu's younger brother, was already living in the boys' quarters at the back. He was 26, chronically unemployed and allergic to accountability. He borrowed money and forgot to mention it. He borrowed Rafiu's hair and returned it 3 days later without explanation. He had his father's face and none of his father's character. When Ngozi and Dike found each other, it was not romantic. It was 2 people recognizing in the other a shared grievance, that they were both standing on the outside of a life that should have been theirs. It started as conversation. Then it became something else. Then Ngozi discovered she was carrying Dike's child, and conversation became conspiracy. Somo knew none of this. Somo was at that moment sitting in the garden with her daughter on her lap, reading to her from a book of Yoruba folktales, her voice rising and falling with the story, her daughter's fingers curled into her wrapper. She did not see the storm. She never saw it coming, because some betrayals wear the face of family, and family you do not guard against. The festival at Owo Falls happened every year in the dry season, when the water was low enough to see the rocks beneath and the air smelt of roasted corn and palm oil from 100 different pots. The whole community came. Families spread their mats along the bank, children ran between legs, the older women sat in circles and talked about everything and nothing. It was the kind of day that felt safe because it always had been. Somo had been looking forward to it for weeks. She had sewn a new Ankara wrapper in burnt orange and gold, and Rafiu had looked at her that morning the way he always looked at her when she dressed up, like he was seeing her for the first time all over again. "Stop staring," she told him, laughing. "I'm not staring, I'm appreciating. There's a difference." She shook her head and kissed him on the cheek, and he caught her wrist before she could pull away and kissed her properly, the way that made her forget what she was about to say. Her daughter Kemi walked in and made a loud noise of disgust, and they both burst out laughing. It was a good morning. It was the last good morning for a long time. At the festival, Ngozi stayed close to Somo, closer than usual. She refilled her cup before it was empty. She brought her food she hadn't asked for. She laughed at everything Somo said and touched her arm when she spoke, and if you did not know better, you would have said she was being a wonderful sister. Dike was there too, circling at a distance, his eyes moving between Ngozi and the river. By late afternoon, the palm wine had been flowing for hours. Somo was relaxed, her wrapper loosened slightly, her sandals off, her feet in the cool grass at the river's edge. Ngozi appeared beside her with a fresh cup. "Drink," she said warmly. "This one is from the good pot, the one Papa used to like." Somo took it. She did not hesitate. Why would she hesitate? This was her sister. She drank half the cup in one go and smiled. "It's sweet," she said. "Yes," Ngozi said, "it is." 20 minutes later, Somo's vision began to blur at the edges. She thought it was tiredness, the heat, the long day, the dancing. She sat down on the grass and tried to focus. The sounds around her became distant and strange, like she was hearing everything through water. She looked for Rafiu, but the faces around her had stopped making sense. "Rafiu," she said, but her voice came out wrong. She did not feel Ngozi's hands on her back. She did not feel the moment the ground disappeared beneath her. She did not hear the splash or the screaming that followed, or Rafiu's voice tearing itself apart, calling her name at the top of his lungs. The river took her. The night took the rest. Rafiu went into the water after her. 3 men had to drag him out. He dove again. They dragged him out again. He stood on the bank until midnight, soaking wet and shaking, refusing to leave, calling her name until his voice gave out. Ngozi stood behind him with her hand on his shoulder, whipping convincingly into the sleeve of her blouse. They searched for 3 days. They found nothing. On the 4th day, the elder said what nobody wanted to say. Rafiu did not speak for 2 weeks. He sat in the compound and stared at the wall and refused food, and when Kemi climbed into his lap and asked where Mama was, he held her so tightly she squirmed, and he still did not have an answer. They buried an empty casket. The compound was full of people and completely hollow. What nobody knew, what nobody could have known, was that 3 miles downstream, in the grey hour before sunrise, a fisherman named Sunday had pulled a body from the shallows. A woman, still breathing, barely. He had loaded her into his canoe and paddled 2 hours to the nearest road and flagged down a vehicle and sat beside her in the back, holding her hand the whole way to the government hospital in Ijebu-Ode, talking to her the entire time, even though she could not hear him, because he felt that silence would be the wrong thing. She was admitted as patient 7. No name, no family, no history. She did not wake for 4 months. When she did, the first thing she said was not a word. It was a sound, a low, confused sound, like someone surfacing from very deep water. The nurse beside her jumped. The doctor was called. Questions were asked. She answered none of them correctly because she did not know the answers. She did not know her name. She did not know the year. She did not know the face looking back at her in the small mirror they held up. What she knew was smaller and stranger. She knew how to fold a wrapper in the Ibadan style. She knew 3 Yoruba proverbs that surfaced in her mind complete and intact, like furniture in a flooded house, still standing. She knew that someone somewhere was looking for her, not a thought exactly, more like a feeling that lived in her chest and would not leave. The hospital kept her for 8 months. When she was discharged, she had no home to go to. A social worker found her a room in a widow's house in Ijebu-Ode. She found work as a seamstress. She was quiet and competent, and nobody knew what to make of her. She did not know what to make of herself. She called herself Tolu. It came to her one morning for no reason and felt more right than anything else she had tried. For years, she lived like this, half a person, functional but incomplete, like a book with its first chapter torn out. She had dreams that felt like memories, a compound with a green gate, a child laughing, a man's hands, a voice saying her name in a way that meant something more than a name. She kept a photograph. It had been in the pocket of the dress she was admitted in, a small water-damaged photograph of a man standing in front of an iron gate, smiling at whoever was taking the picture. She did not know who he was, but she looked at it every single day, the way you look at something you are not ready to understand yet. 7 years after she woke up, she was walking through a busy market in Sagamu when a small boy, no more than 4 years old, ran directly into her legs and grabbed her wrapper and looked up at her and said, "Mama." His actual mother appeared seconds later, flustered and apologetic, pulling him away. But Somo, Tolu, had stopped completely. Something in her chest cracked open. Not the word, the feeling, the specific weight of small arms around her legs, the specific angle of a child looking up. She stood in that market while people moved around her, and something began to shift, deep and slow, like a continent moving. That night, she dreamt of Rafiu's face clearly for the first time. She woke up with his name in her mouth like she had been saying it all night. She did not go back to sleep. She sat up until morning and began for the first time to remember in a direction. Memory, when it returns after a long absence, does not come back the way you expect. It does not arrive neatly, chapter by chapter with explanations attached. It comes in ambushes. A smell that collapses an entire year into a single second. A sound that opens a door you did not know was there. For Somo, it came in waves, each one stronger than the last, each one leaving her more whole and more shattered at the same time. She remembered Kemi first, her weight, her smell of her hair, the way she laughed with her whole body and fell over from it. Then she remembered the green gate, then the wedding, then Rafiu's hands on her face, then the market where they met, and the argument about tomatoes, and the way he had laughed before he even knew he was laughing. Then she remembered the cup, Ngozi's smile, the sweetness that was not right, the river. She sat with that memory for 3 days before she moved. She did not cry. She was past crying. She was in a different country now, the country of understanding, which is colder and quieter than grief, but far more dangerous to the people who deserve to be afraid. She began carefully. She had learned patience the hard way. She found a lawyer in Ibadan who owed nobody in Lagos anything. She gave him a name, Rafiu Adeleke, and what little she remembered of the address and the company. Within 2 weeks, he had found everything. The compound, the family, the logistics business, still running, larger now, and something else. Rafiu had remarried. 2 years after Somo's disappearance, under pressure from family and tradition, he had taken a wife. The wife was Ngozi. Somo read that line 4 times. Then she set the paper down on the table and looked out the window for a long time. She was not surprised. That was the worst part. She was not surprised at all. She kept investigating. She needed everything before she moved. She needed it airtight. She found the birth certificate next. A girl named Chidima, 14 years old, listed as Ngozi's daughter, father unknown. But someone knew how to read what was not written. She cross-referenced dates. Chidima had been conceived while Ngozi was living in the compound, while Dike was living in the boys' quarters. The timeline was exact and damning. Then she found Dike's obituary. Died 4 years after Somo's disappearance. Road accident on a quiet road, no witnesses, ruled inconclusive. She noted that Ngozi had accompanied him on that trip. She noted that Dike had, 2 weeks before his death, told a friend, documented in a letter the lawyer tracked down, that he was afraid, that he knew something he should not know, that he had made a mistake he could not take back. Dike was not an innocent man, but he did not deserve what happened to him either. He had simply become inconvenient, and Ngozi, someone now understood, dealt with inconvenience the same way she had always dealt with it. She removed it. Somo spent 2 more months preparing. She contacted the police in Lagos and gave them everything: the birth certificate, the letter, the timeline, the medical records from Ijebu Ode Hospital, proving she had been admitted as a drowning victim the same night she disappeared. She gave them the name of Sunday the fisherman, who was still alive, still in Ijebu Ode, and who remembered everything, because some things you do not forget. She told the detective assigned to her case, "I am not going to that house to cause a scene. I am going to finish something. I need you there when it finishes." He looked at her across the desk for a long moment. "We will be there," he said. On the night she chose, a Tuesday, raining, the kind of rain that makes the city feel smaller, she took a taxi to the Adeleke compound and stood at the gate and told Gaba to call his Oga. Gaba ran. Rafiu came down the stairs, pulling a shirt over his head, expecting a delivery, expecting a problem with the night's logistics, expecting anything in the world except what was standing at his gate in the rain. He stopped on the bottom step. He did not move. He looked at her the way a man looks when his mind refuses to process what his eyes are sending. "Somo," he said. It was barely a sound. "Rafiu," she said. He crossed the compound in 4 steps and stood in front of her and reached out and touched her face with both hands, trembling, uncertain, like she might dissolve. She did not dissolve. She was solid and real and standing in his rain-soaked compound after 15 years, and his face broke completely open. "I looked for you," he said, his voice collapsing. "I never stopped. I told them you weren't dead. I told them—" "I know," she said. "I know." He pulled her into his arms and held her the way people hold things they had given up on finding, too tightly, shaking, his face buried in her neck. She held him back. For one moment, in the middle of everything that was about to happen, it was just the 2 of them. Then the light from the front door fell across the compound and Ngozi's voice came from the veranda, sharp and suspicious. "Rafiu, who is at the gate at this time?" She walked forward. She saw the woman in her husband's arms. She stopped. The two sisters looked at each other across the compound yard. Ngozi's face went through 5 different things in 3 seconds. Shock, disbelief, calculation, fear, and then, because she had always been a performer, she rearranged herself into something that looked like outrage. "What is this?" she said loudly. "Rafiu, who is this woman? What is going on?" Rafiu stepped back and looked at Ngozi. Then he looked at Somo. Something in his face had already decided. "Tell me," he said quietly. "You know who she is." "I have never seen this woman in my life," Ngozi said, her voice climbing. "She is clearly disturbed. Someone needs to call." "I know about the palm wine," Somo said. Silence. "I know about DK. I know about Chidinma. I know the road where DK died, and I know what he wrote in that letter 2 weeks before." Somo's voice did not rise. It did not need to. It landed like something heavy and flat. "I know everything, Ngozi. I have known for 2 years. I was just waiting until I had enough to bury you with." Ngozi laughed, a high, brittle sound. "This woman is mad," she said to the small crowd of household staff now gathered in the compound. "Rafiu, you can see she is—" "The police are outside the gate," Somo said. "They have been there for 20 minutes. The laugh died. Rafiu turned to look at Ngozi, really look at her, and something that had been quietly breaking in him for 15 years finished breaking now. "Tell me," he said, low and terrible. "Tell me right now. Is she who I think she is?" Ngozi said nothing. "Tell me," his voice cracked through the compound like a whip. She was going to ruin everything. Ngozi's composure shattered all at once, ugly and sudden. "You would have given her everything, the house, the business, everything that could have." She stopped. She had said too much. She had said exactly enough. Rafiu stepped back from her like she was something she did not want on her skin. Chidinma appeared at the top of the stairs, 14-year-old, her mother's eyes, watching everything. Somo looked up at her. The girl looked back, frightened, confused, innocent in the way that only children caught in adult disasters are innocent. Somo walked to the bottom of the stairs and looked up at her gently. "None of this is your fault," she said. "Not one piece of it. Do you hear me?" The girl nodded slowly, her eyes filling. When the police came through the gate and took Ngozi's arms, she screamed. She screamed Rafiu's name, then Somo's, and then things that were not words at all. Rafiu did not watch her go. He was looking at Somo. Later, much later, after the statement and the questions and the long, terrible night had finally ended, they sat together on the steps of the veranda in the early morning quiet. The rain had stopped. The compound smelled of wet earth. "I never believed you were gone," Rafiu said. "Everyone told me to accept it. I couldn't." "I know," Somo said. "I held your photograph every day for 7 years before I remembered your name." He reached over and took her hand and did not let go. There was a long road ahead, fractured children to rebuild trust with, a trial to survive, a household to remake from the wreckage. Healing was not going to arrive the way love had, quickly and all at once. It was going to be slow, and it was going to cost them both. But they were here. They had made it to the same morning. Somo walked to the river the next day alone. She stood at the bank and looked at the water moving past, indifferent and ancient and continuous. The river did not try to kill her. It simply took her where the story needed her to go, away from the danger, into the long dark, and back out again when the time was right. She placed her palm flat on the surface. "I thank you," she said quietly. The water moved. That was all. It was enough. If this story stayed with you, if you felt every moment of what Somo carried and what she came back to reclaim, then do something with that feeling right now. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear a story about survival today, and subscribe so you never miss what we put out next. And before you go, Drop a comment and tell us where in the world you are watching from. We read every single one. Until next time, remember, the truth does not drown, it only waits.